Thanks to a preference for small ball and contact hitting, no-hitters are much rarer in NPB than they are in MLB. As you can imagine, the list of pitchers who've thrown one reads like a list of perennial All-Stars and Hall of Famers. There are, as always, a few oddballs in the group. There's Teruo Owaki, who was a slightly below-average pitcher for most of his 7-year career. His no-hitter was notable because he didn't strike out a single batter, an achievement he shares with Chicago Cubs pitcher Ken Holtzman. There's Yoshio Inoue, a back-into-the-rotation guy for the Lions in the early 60s, and Shinichi Kondo, who no-hit the pennant-winning Yomiuri Giants in his pro-pitching debut in 1987, but could never build on that momentum. Then there's the foreign pitchers who've thrown no-hitters. You'd think that they'd be a group of oddballs, but not really. Gene Bach and Taiyuan Kuo were two of the best pitchers in NPB history. Period. Terry Bross won 2 rings at the front end of the rotation on the mid-90s Swallows. Melvin Bunch was the Dragons' number 2 starter in his 3 years with the team, and Rick Guttermson was on steroids. But in all seriousness, he was a fairly solid pitcher who spent 4 years in NPB. There is, however, one oddball. Narciso Elvira, the lone Mexican to throw a no-no in NPB history. Narciso Elvira was from... I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's in Veracruz, Mexico, and he was signed by the Milwaukee Brewers as an international free agent in 1987. He was considered a top 25 prospect by 1990 and made his MLB debut the same year. It didn't go well, and he'd be sent back down to the minors for 1991. He'd be traded to the Texas Rangers in 1992, but after failing to crack the big club, he'd leave to join Sultanes de Monterrey's B team. He'd sign with the Dodgers in 1996, but after 2 below-average years in AAA, where he bounced between Sultanes and the Albuquerque Dukes, he was cut again. He then joined Piratas de Campeche, where he finally showed some of that potential that made him a top prospect. In 1999 with Piratas, he went 10-6 with a 2.25 ERA and threw 2 no-hitters. Though Piratas was knocked out in the first round of the playoffs, it was enough to get the attention of the Kintetsu Buffaloes. The 90s Buffaloes were famous for their abysmal pitching, and were looking for a quick fix. Elvira fit that mold, and while they didn't expect him to be 2 no-hitters good, they still expected him to round out the front of their rotation. He did not. He started the second game of the season and got beat up by the Blue Wave to the tune of 4 runs on 2 walks and 2 hits. He was pulled before the first inning was even over. It was a horror show. To be fair, the rest of the Buffaloes staff didn't do too well either, and they lost 9-2. Elvira was sent down to the knee gun to get himself in order, and he'd make his second start on May 17th against the Lions. It didn't go well either. While he did pick up his first strikeout, he went 2 innings, giving up 4 hits, 3 walks, and 3 runs. All earned. Despite keeping pace with the Lions offensively, the only run the Buffaloes could scratch across was a Tuffy Rhodes solo home run. They'd lose 4-1. His first win would come out of the pen against the Fighters on May 26th, where he went 4 2/3 and struck out 3 while only giving up 1. Still, his ERA stood at a colossal 8.64. His next 3 starts would go just as poorly, going 0-2 and giving up a combined 13 runs in only 11 2/3 innings. But Elvira had one advantage. Despite it only being June, the Lions were charging away at the front, and Kintetsu felt safe in effectively punting the season. So, Elvira got to keep starting. When the Lions rolled into Osaka Dome on the 20th to face Elvira, the 16,000 fans who showed up weren't expecting much. The last time the Lions had faced him, they'd scored 3 runs early and chased him after 2 innings. To be fair, Yuki Tanaka didn't fare much better, but still. This Lions team was very balanced offensively, and was actively making a run at the pennant. The only upside for Elvira was the fact that third baseman Tony Fernandez would be sitting that day. Nobody in the building gave Elvira a shot, which made it all the more shocking when Elvira no-hit the Lions. It was a dominant performance too. 9 Ks, only 3 walks. Good for a James game score of 93 and a Tango game score of 97. To put that in perspective, his previous best was a 50 James and 44 Tango in a no decision against the Blue Wave on June 2nd. It was an amazing performance. And it was a fluke. He got beat up by the fighters in his next start to the tune of 5 hits and 3 earned runs in just 2 innings. To be fair to him, that game was a slugfest the Buffaloes won 14-10. Still, that no-hitter gave Elvira job security, as it would be an extremely bad look to cut a guy who'd pulled out a performance like that. And Elvira would reward the Buffaloes with 4 more solid performances that year. On June 6th, he pitched 7 scoreless against the Lions. On August 10th, he'd go 8 innings against the Fighters, giving up a lone run. He'd go 6 2/3 scoreless on September 3rd before the Lions chased him. And on September 16th, he'd pitch a complete game shutout against the pennant-winning Hawks, striking out 8 in what was his second-best performance of the season. Those performances were enough for the Buffaloes to keep him on for the 2001 season, but he'd be cut 6 games in because his ERA was 5.84. He'd be replaced by Jeremy Powell and Sean Bergman, who would be instrumental in the Buffaloes' run to the pennant. And that was it for Elvira. Just kidding, he immediately became the number 2 starter on the 2002 Samsung Lions and won a Korean Series ring. How does 2003 season go? Cut 6 games in with an ERA over 7. Asian baseball. What have you done for me lately? Elvira would return to Mexico and rejoin Piratas, playing well enough to amass a small fortune and buy a large farm, where he employed nearly 100 workers. Unfortunately, in a place like his home state of Veracruz, that makes you a target. He'd be kidnapped by the local cartel in 2015 and was later found beaten and chained to a tree. Then, in January of 2020, he and his son were gunned down by a cartel hit squad near their farm. Elvira was just 52 years old. Narciso Rivera had a baseball career marred by ups and downs, the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. It's best we remember him for who he was. On his day, he could pitch with the best of him. And his 3 no-hitters and Korean Series ring proved that. Descanse en paz, señor Elvira. Usted fue un gran hombre. Buffaloes, Buffaloes.